During a stormy night, a woman named Ezra gives birth to a healthy young boy. His birth is noticed by all the powerful Magi across the world, as the amount of ruck responding to him is nothing like they have seen before. Proudly holding him up, his father Badr holds him up in his arms and gives him the name Sinbad. Some time passes and their country, Pertivia, is successfully waging war, expanding its borders all the way to the Great Rhine Empire. Thanks to that, the citizens prosper, and Badr is given a hefty sum of gold as compensation for his efforts during it, with the soldiers calling him a hero among men. But Badr refuses to accept the reward, insisting that he does not need such an extravagant sum to live, at the same time revealing that he has lost a leg while serving. Instead, he returns to fishing, thinking back of his time in the war and declaring that he will never get involved in wars again, as he has something much more important to focus on now, namely his son. Much to his surprise, Sinbad snuck on the fishing boat at some point. A sudden storm catches them off guard, but even though Badr struggles to find their way back to the coast, Sinbad directs him with absolute calmness and certainty, leading them through the storm. This makes Badr realize that Sinbad is special, and that he will one day be able to change not only this country, which is given into greed, but maybe even the whole world. 2 years pass, and Sinbad has turned 5 years old. Although he is eager to help his father out and join him when he sails out to fish, Badr still refuses to take him along, insisting that he is still too young. Just as they are arguing about it, a group of angry villagers come by and start harassing Badr for not helping out with the war effort. In their greed, the country has begun waging war against the Rhine Empire, which turned out to be a huge mistake, as the war dragged on, depleting Pertivia's treasury. This turned its citizens to become desperate, and they accuse anyone who is not doing their part in the war of being against the country, determined to win the war at all cost. But Badr has no intention of returning to the war, and his uncaring attitude only serves to further incite the angry mob. They proceed to beat him up in order to vent their frustrations, and he does not even try to resist. This upsets Sinbad, who wonders why his father, the hero, refuses to use his strength and stand up against such unjust treatment. While having dinner, Sinbad goes to fetch some fresh water from the well. It is there that he runs into a badly injured stranger and alerts his parents. Badr decides to take the stranger in and tend to his wounds. When the stranger awakens, he thanks Sinbad for helping him, explaining that he is a shipwreck merchant named Darius, and that he is truly grateful for their kindness. While he is talking, Sinbad is confused why he looks so different compared to everyone else in the village. Darius quickly concludes that Sinbad has never set foot outside of the village, so he reveals to him that there are many different countries and cultures out in the world which he has yet to see. Sinbad is quickly entranced by Darius' tale, demanding to hear more about the world and Darius' adventures. Seeing that, Badr allows Darius to stay in their home until his wounds are healed. Expressing his gratitude, Darius gladly shares his tales with Sinbad, and the gifted child becomes drawn in by the stories of unknown foreign lands and adventures waiting on the horizon. After a few days, Darius prepares to set out at the break of dawn, when Badr is away fishing. Suddenly, a few soldiers come looking for an enemy spy. When they become suspicious of Ezra hiding someone in their home, Darius suddenly lunges out at them and slaughters them with ease. She screams in panic, which wakes Sinbad up, and he rushes to his mother's side only to see Darius covered in the blood of the soldiers. Realizing that he has been made, Darius takes Sinbad hostage, demanding to be granted safe passage so he can escape. Sinbad questions Darius, wondering why he would do something like that, only to learn that he is actually an intelligence officer from Rhine. However, since Sinbad's family is shunned upon, none of the villagers that gathered around the commotion care to help out. At that moment, Badr returns, and upon seeing what is going on, he quickly starts begging Darius to release his son and save himself by selling out Rhine instead. But Darius refuses and starts mocking Badr for even suggesting something like that. Realizing that there is only one thing he can do to save Sinbad, he surprises everyone by swiftly lunging at Darius, grabbing his sword with one hand, while driving his own into him for the killing blow. As Darius' life fades away, Badr tells him how he does not care if he mocks him or looks down upon him, but he will not allow him to harm his family. Afterwards, Badr is found guilty for sheltering a foreign spy and is forcefully recruited back into service. When the time comes for him to be taken away, the villagers gather to throw insults at him. Sinbad cannot take it, and he stands up for his father, demanding that the villagers stop being so mean to him. This only incites them further, and they attempt to go after Sinbad next. But at that moment, Badr yells out, commanding them to leave his family alone. He proceeds to remove the clothes, hiding his extensive scars left behind from his time in the war, stating that there is no reason for them to be angry anymore as he is going back to war now, but he also asks them if they would want to see their own family members in the same shape as he is, asking them if the war is truly that great. Before he is taken away, Badr entrusts Sinbad with taking care of his mother, a duty which Sinbad takes pride in. This is the last they have seen of Badr, as 2 months later word of his death has reached them. But instead of his body, the only things returned to them were his sword and a few personal belongings. This transpired 9 years ago, and Sinbad has now turned into quite a capable 14-year-old boy. While the war raged on, a strange structure they named a dungeon suddenly appeared right between the two warring nations. Thus, both Partivia and Rhyme became determined to conquer it. But despite over 10,000 men that were sent inside of it, none have managed to accomplish the goal. In the town of Kantastia, a group of deserters turned bandits attack a helpless trade carriage led by women, children, and the elderly. Just as they are about to strike them down, Sinbad makes his appearance. Using his unique ability to read the flow of fate, just like with the waves at sea, he fights them off on his own without breaking a sweat. In order to thank him for it, they offer some fresh fruits to him. Just as one of the girls opens a barrel of fruit, she discovers a stranger hiding inside of it. The stranger introduces himself as Yunan, a wandering traveler, and tags along with Sinbad back to his town as he has offered him a place to stay. It turns out Sinbad has become quite popular back in town, and there is no resentment towards him or his family as in the past. Instead, everyone is grateful for his help. Arriving back to his home, Sinbad introduces Yunan to his mother, who appears to be battling an illness. The following day, Sinbad heads out early to go on his next job. Yunan learns from Ezra that she has been ill for a very long time now, and she feels like she is being a burden on Sinbad, who cannot bring himself to leave her behind in this state. Suddenly, their chat is interrupted by a village woman, who informs them that Sinbad has been captured by the kingdom's soldiers. One of the platoon leaders, Dragul, has come to arrest him and force him into service. It turns out that Sinbad has been refusing to respond to the military's summons for a while now. But Sinbad explains that he has no intention of taking part in the kingdom's war because they are only using their people as expendable tools. Hearing his protest, the villagers back him up, openly berating the soldiers for what they are doing. Dragul and his men are surprised by their attitude, so he gives Sinbad some time to think it over, reminding him that his mother will pay the price if he betrays the kingdom and does not respond to the summons, giving him an ultimatum where he has to join the expedition into the dungeon the following day or face the consequences. Afterwards, Sinbad explains to Yuman that over 10,000 people have already tried in vain to clear that dungeon, and now he is forced to go into that death trap to die, while the same fate awaits him if he refuses to go, declaring how there is no future for this country anymore. Hearing that, Yunan gives him a new perspective. He advises him to use his unique power and enter the dungeon with his own goal in mind. Inside of it, he will be able to gain the power of a king and become a ruler himself. That will set him on the course to change not only this country, but the whole world as well. Sinbad wonders just who Yunan truly is, but he refuses to give him a clear answer. Back home, Sinbad is unable to tell his mother that he will venture into the dungeon, but she figures out what he is about to do, so she entrusts to him his father's sword, wishing him good luck on his adventure. The following day, just as Dragul is getting ready to march his forces into the dungeon, Sinbad appears at the entrance. But instead of joining the platoon, as is damned of him, he declares that he will conquer the dungeon and claim the power within for his own, running ahead of them to get a head start into it. Entering the dungeon, Sinbad quickly realizes just how huge the area within it is, but he has no time to enjoy the scenery as monsters start descending upon him. At the same time, the soldiers who followed after also find themselves engaged in combat by the same monsters. However, they are unable to match the monster's strength, and soon enough only Dragul is left standing from their entire platoon. Seeing that Dragul is also about to meet his end, Sinbad intervenes and brings him to a safe spot. Although grateful for Sinbad's intervention, Dragul still wants to assert his status over him and make him understand his position. To do so, he explains just how prestigious his family is and gives him the entire long name. But Sinbad finds that too long and instead decides to call him Draken. This enraged Draken, but he decides to put his anger aside for now, as a more prevalent threat suddenly appears in the form of a massive dragon. Noticing the gates which should lead deeper into the dungeon, Draken takes charge and starts heading for it, despite the danger blocking his path. Sinbad tries to convince him to give it up, seeing that all of his men have already met their end, but Draken simply states how offering his life for the country is something any soldier would gladly do before setting out on his own. Through some effort, he manages to reach the gate but finds them locked. Just as he realizes that he cannot proceed further, the massive dragon notices him and starts charging up its attack. Realizing that he is about to die, Draken remembers how the girl he loves, first princess of Partivia, Serendine, ended up marrying his older brother instead. But when he snaps out of it, he realizes that he has been saved by Sinbad yet again. Disgusted by everything that has happened to him thus far, he asks to be killed, as he has shown fear while facing his enemy. But instead of listening to him, Sinbad repeats what he has always preached, how there is nothing wrong with running away in fear, as everyone's life is precious. and a country that discards its citizens' lives instead of protecting them is not needed in this world. To show him his conviction, Sinbad charges the dragon on his own, using his unique power to find an opening and deliver a fatal blow to the monster. With relative ease, he brings it down, which allows the two of them to open the gate and proceed deeper into the dungeon. They face many more monsters and obstacles on their journey, during which Draken ends up developing some respect for Sinbad. At long last, they reach the final chamber, where Sinbad discovers the lamp holding the djinn of this dungeon, Bal. Once Bal is summoned, he asks the two of them who it is that wishes to claim his power and become a king. When both of them declare they wish for it at the same time, he tells them to show him just how competent his future master will be. Sinbad desires to change this country and create a better future for its citizens, while Draken does not want to betray the promise he has given to Sarandine and wishes to claim the power so he can present it to the current king. Even though Draken is a more skilled swordsman, he is unable to get the better of Sinbad, who quickly turns the tide of battle in his favor. While getting pummeled, Draken remembers how Sarandine ordered him to make sure he comes back alive, no matter what. In addition to that, he remembers that his brother bears no love towards Sarandine, so he knows she will not find happiness in that marriage. Despite that, he could not bring himself to make his feelings for her known. Using that as rage and desperation to fuel his fighting spirit, he tries his best to overpower Sinbad, but in the end, Sinbad still emerges victorious. Witnessing the outcome of their match, Bal imbues Sinbad with his power and transports both of them out of the dungeon along with countless riches. Outside, Sinbad is greeted by Partigian soldiers who quickly congratulate him and demand that he turns over everything he acquired in the dungeon. But Sinbad refuses, openly declaring that he claimed the power for his own, and he will be using it to change this country for the better. The soldiers quickly step in to capture him, but suddenly Yunan appears next to him, helping him awaken Bal's power. Using Bal's power, Sinbad quickly makes it clear that the soldiers are no match for him. But Yunan does him another favor, and before they even get a chance to talk, he whisks him away, transporting him back to his village in the blink of an eye, before vanishing once again. Returning to the village, Sinbad's high spirits are quickly brought down as he learns that his mother is at her deathbed. It turns out he was gone for 2 whole weeks, and her condition has suddenly gotten worse. Thanks to Yunan, he has made it in time to hear her final words and be by her side as she passes on. Thanks to Draken, news of what happened in the dungeon has become known rather quickly, and Sinbad has become a wanted person within the kingdom. When Sarandine saw what conditions Sinbad put Draken in, she decided to confront him herself, but once he made short work of her, he held her hostage just so he could make his escape, finally setting out into the world with the conviction to change it for the better by using his newly acquired power. As soon as the first dungeon was conquered by Sinbad, many others started appearing all over the world. This spurred out countless adventurers to try and conquer them, and marked the beginning of the age of conquering dungeons. Finding himself adrift at sea, Sinbad notices a desperate battle raging nearby with 2 siblings fighting a massive sea monster. Realizing they are in trouble, Sinbad jumps in and saves them thanks to his newfound power. Unbeknownst to him, Partivians have sent a party of assassins after him, led by none other than Draken, who was given one last chance to atone for his failure and bring Sinbad's weapon back by any means necessary. Sinbad learns that the 2 siblings are called Hina and Pipirika. However, Hina is yet to get his warrior name. Since Pipirika was knocked out, she believes that her brother is the one who has slain the monster, which finally completed the requirement for him to become a fully fledged warrior. To not ruin the moment, Sinbad does not reveal the truth to her, and instead apologies to Hina for stealing his prey. Despite being warned by them that their clan does not take kindly to strangers, Sinbad still insists on accompanying them back to it, determined to get to know the new people. As soon as they make it back, Pipirika announces that Hina has finally passed the trial, and thus their father, the chieftain, declares that a festival must be held. While preparations for the festival are being made, Sinbad gets a chance to talk with their father as well. There he learns that a dungeon has appeared near the village. He immediately warns them how dangerous it is to send people into it, and asks the chieftain to forbid his people from entering, so they would not waste their lives like back in Partivia. He proceeds to back his request up by revealing that he is the one who conquered the first dungeon, showing them his father's sword, which has become the vessel that houses Bal. Heeding his warning, the chieftain immediately warms up to Sinbad, stating how strong people are always treated with the honor they deserve in this place. Hina cannot bring himself to reveal the truth about the monster he allegedly has slain. Noticing that something is wrong, Pipirika comforts him and reassures him that everything will be okay, visibly excited by the fact that her brother is becoming a warrior, as that will make it possible for him to date the woman he likes. Deciding to call it a day, Sinbad goes to sleep. It is then that he is suddenly assaulted by one of the assassins after him. However, the assassin is unable to finish the job and gets captured by Sinbad instead. Realizing that the assassin is just a child, Sinbad questions him why he would do something that would make his parents sad. It is then that the child proudly proclaims how he has already taken the lives of his parents. Hearing that, Sinbad slaps him across the face, reprimanding him for saying something like that with pride. At that moment, the child manages to break out of his restraints and make a quick escape, backed up by his subordinates. Hina and Pipirika wonder who that was, and Sinbad tells them that he is a wanted man back home, so they must be agents from Partivia. Seeing how he forges on ahead, despite not having a home to return to and being a wanted man at the same time, Hina gets inspired by him. With the morning approaching, the time comes for Hina to officially become a warrior, but he manages to sneak away, only leaving behind a note. His sister finds the note and brings it to Sinbad, worried out of her mind for Hina's safety. It turns out he decided to conquer the dungeon in order to become a real warrior. Worried about him, Sinbad makes haste and follows after. Upon reaching the dungeon, Hina enters without hesitation and quickly finds himself in its deadly depths. At first, he thinks Sinbad has exaggerated how dangerous the place is as he finds himself surrounded by beautiful butterflies. But the moment they start trying to eat him alive, he realizes just what kind of place this is. And he is not alone, as Draken's unit has made its way into the dungeon as well. Eventually, Hina makes his way to the door leading to the innermost chamber, but his progress is impeded by a giant crab monster. Just as he finally manages to get the upper hand in the fight, Draken's group jumps in and kills the monsters in his stead, taking the key from it as their own. This enraged Hina, and he demands that they return the key to him, charging into them at full power. At first, Draken's group was not interested in fighting him, but this changes their mind and they start getting serious. Working together, they quickly get the upper hand, but before they can finish him off, Sinbad also makes his appearance. This quickly turns into a tag team battle, and despite Sinbad having the upper hand, Draken manages to interrupt his power before he can unleash it, tipping the scales against them. Luckily, Hina manages to grab him and swim away before they are overpowered. The magician accompanying Draken's group, Fallon, attempts to end them by freezing the water around them, but they are fast enough to avoid getting turned into popsicles. Noticing that they got away, she gives the 3 assassins a special medicine, telling them it will be necessary to finish the mission successfully. As soon as they take it, they feel lighter, with all of the wounds and fatigue they sustained disappearing in an instant. Using the key they acquired, they make their way to the inner chamber, where they run into this dungeon's djinn, Valefor. However, Valefor immediately lashes out at Fallon, outraged by the fact that someone like her would make her way into his domain. Destroying her in an instant, he reveals that she was just an empty vessel, while her true self was back in Partivia, next to Draken's brother. With her out of the way, he wonders who here has what it takes to gain the power to become a king, but is quickly disappointed by Draken's response. At that moment, Hina and Sinbad also enter the innermost chamber. Valefor repeats his question, elaborating that anyone with his power could become king by either taking over a country or starting a new one with the vast amount of wealth acquired inside the dungeon. With that revelation, everyone starts showing interest in it, thinking of what they could do given the opportunity. Happy with their responses, Valefor reveals that the one to inherit his power will be the one who manages to catch his little cat clone. However, there is a time limit to it, and if they fail to catch it, they will end up trapped inside the dungeon for all eternity. At first, it is every person for themselves, but this quickly proves to be futile, as the cat is too nimble for them to catch, while also working against each other. Realizing that, Sinbad steps up and rallies them together, declaring that he will step down from competing, and will instead help direct them to make sure the cat is caught, not caring who gets to inherit the djinn's power. After all, if they fail to do it, it will all be in vain anyway. Following his direction, they encircle the cat and jump on his signal. But this proves to be exactly what Sinbad was going for, as he covers the only possible escape route for the cat and catches it before the time runs out. All of them feel betrayed by Sinbad, but that feeling vanishes quickly when he gives them his speech. He declares that he needs this power so he can create a country which will change this world. He wants to make this world a place where all the people can get along with each other, and in order to do so, he will need a lot more comrades and a lot more resources. His power to inspire and lead people resonates within them, and even Draken finds himself wavering. And when he asks them to join him so he can realize his dream, they find it hard to refuse. The assassins, Mahad and Vittel, are first to step forward, and Sinbad quickly accepts them. Even their leader, who tries to catch Sinbad by surprise yet again, finds his resolve wavering when Sinbad refuses to give up on him, despite everything he has done so far. Suddenly, dark ruck starts flowing out of the assassins, which seems to have been Fallon's plan all along. Valefor warns them that they need to stop what is happening before the demon is born out of the dark ruck. But when Draken tries to shoot the assassins, Sinbad blocks his path, declaring that he will save his comrades, no matter what. Before long, the demon has fully assumed his form and engages Sinbad directly. Its overwhelming power is a lot to take on, and Draken insists that they must put it down, regardless of the well-being of those 3 assassins it absorbed into itself. Valefor then reveals that they can be saved if its core is destroyed before they have been completely consumed by it. With the target in mind, Sinbad gets ready to unleash Baal, but his weapon is suddenly snatched away by Fallon, who makes a repeated appearance. She reveals that she is working with Draken's brother, Barbarossa, who uses her to communicate to Draken that he is entirely aware of his feelings towards his wife, and so he must be disposed of. Just as the demon is about to deliver the finishing blow to Draken, Hina jumps in and saves him, getting into the demon's grasp in his stead. Watching Sinbad struggle despite losing Baal inspires Hina, and he stops holding back. Using his full power, he breaks out of the demon's grasp. Focusing all of his strength into his spear, he gets ready to pierce the demon's core, while Sinbad keeps it busy. Fallon realizes that Sinbad can see the flow of Ruck, so she uses her magic to root him in place. This almost causes him to get crushed by the demon, were it not for Draken, who comes to his rescue. He declares that he will survive this dungeon and return home to take Barbarossa's head for what he has done, determined to protect the princess he loves with all of his might. Together with Sinbad, he is able to buy enough time for Hina to finish charging up his death blow, which successfully brings the dark creature down, freeing the trio from the dark Ruck. Fallon tries to cast a spell, but Sinbad intercepts her and manages to retrieve Baal from her. Suddenly, more dark Ruck erupts from the youngest assassin, revealing that he is about to fall into depravity. Following his instincts, Sinbad reaches out towards the source of it, which plunges his consciousness into his. With the child's memories flashing by, he learns that his name is Jafar and sees how he was forced to murder his own parents in order to survive. This makes his inner self struggle with keeping it together, knowing he has no place to return to and no reason to live. But Sinbad steps in, telling him that he will be his reason to live and give him a place he can belong to. His words inspire Jafar, and he manages to push back the encroaching dark Ruck. Together with Baal's power, they manage to completely dispel the darkness within him and prevent the demon from coming back yet again. Witnessing that, everyone agrees that it should be Sinbad who is to become king, and Valefor is more than happy to give him his power. With that, the dungeon disappears and they all return safely. While everyone returns to the village, Draken takes his leave back home, explaining that he has someone he has to protect back there, and he doubts he will ever cross Sinbad's path again. As he is leaving, he thinks how he would like to serve Sinbad as his lord instead, but leaves that wishful thinking behind. Unbeknownst to him, the sense of devotion he has developed to Sinbad has granted him some of Baal's power as well. Back in the village, Hina finally gets his full warrior name, Hinahoho. But he quickly explains to his father that he has no intention of staying in the village, as he has found someone he respects and desires to follow from here on out. Hearing his words, his father gives him his blessings, telling him how proud he is of him. Before leaving, Hinahoho and Sinbad visit the ruler of these lands, whose daughter Hinahoho has the desire to take as his bride. Now that he is a fully fledged warrior, he has every right to do so, and after passing her father's tests, that is exactly what he gets. In addition to that, Sinbad secures the monopoly on trade with their lands and becomes known as not only an adventurer, but also a trader. While sailing towards their next destination, Hinahoho's wife, Ruramu, takes it upon herself to make sure both Sinbad and Jafar have a proper education. While she is well educated, she takes her role as their tutor seriously and uses force to drill her lessons into their heads. Finally arriving at their destination, Aporia, a bustling port city in the Rhine Empire, Sinbad quickly starts peddling the goods they brought with them. Although they seem to attract quite the crowd, the guards show up and force them to pack their goods and leave, as they require a permit from the trading association before they can sell their wares. This exchange is observed by a hooded man, who approaches Sinbad and offers to buy off his entire stock, explaining that they will not get in trouble as he himself has the required permits. They quickly jump at the chance to sell their wares, making quite a lot of money all at once. But their happiness is short-lived, as they realize that the merchant is now reselling their goods at a much higher price. But while everyone else is upset, Sinbad becomes inspired by the trader's mettle, excited to compete with such cunning rivals down the line. Thus, he sends everyone back to use the money they have earned and buy more goods, while he stays behind and finds a way for them to conduct business properly by the time they return. While he is wandering the streets, thinking of what to do, he runs into the same hooded merchant from before. Deciding to take his chance with him, he asks to join him for dinner. There he learns that he is a merchant from Balbad, a small trading nation next to Rhine. Much to the merchant's surprise, Sinbad is not angry about the outcome of their trade. Instead, he wishes to learn more about it so he can turn a better profit in the future. Using Ruramu's lessons to his advantage, Sinbad manages to navigate their talks to a favorable standing. After revealing that he is one of the dungeon conquerors, Sinbad is seen in a completely different light by the experienced trader, who praises his stories, declaring that they are better than anything poets could put together. When Sinbad reveals that he wishes to create a country which will be so influential that it will be able to change the world, the merchant decides to put him to a test. telling him to earn 1,000 gold coins in a month's time in order to prove he has what it takes to go after this dream of his, revealing that this sum is also needed for anyone who desires to join the association. If he does so, he will back him up and make sure he gets the necessary permits to conduct trade in rhyme. Accepting the challenge, Sinbad starts thinking how he could possibly earn such a massive sum in such a short amount of time. It is then that what the merchant told him hits him, and he comes up with a brilliant idea. In order to earn his gold, he starts reenacting the battles, retelling the stories of his dungeon conquest in the city. This proves to be a massive hit, and he starts earning a considerable sum. Unfortunately, by the time the merchant returns, Sinbad has failed to acquire the necessary 1,000 gold pieces, so he asks for an extension until he can get the whole sum together. When the merchant sees that Sinbad understood his hint and got on the right track, he decides to give him the gold needed to sign up with the trading association. Sinbad is shocked to see someone just throw such a large sum of money around, so he wonders just who he is. It is then that the guards escorting the merchant reveal that he is in fact Rashid, the king of Balbad. While Sinbad is busy performing in Emporia, Jafar is struggling with his studies aboard the ship. Even though he feels like quitting, Rurumu manages to get through to him, reminding him how important it is to change the way he lived as one of the assassins. In addition to that, she reveals that she is soon going to give birth, so she wants him to learn how to be a good midwife to assist with the delivery, much to his dismay. Considering how popular Sinbad's performances have become, Rashid suggests he should bring it straight to the theater. Just as expected, he quickly manages to capture the hearts of the audience, charming them with an unparalleled performance, unlike anything they have seen thus far, thanks to the implementation of magic powers given to him by the jinns. Soon enough word spreads of his stellar shows, and people from all corners of the Rhyme Empire flock to watch him perform. However, he notices that many people are still unable to watch the shows as the space in the theater is quite limited. It is then that he notices a spectacle ongoing in the massive Colosseum and comes up with an idea. When the rest of Sinbad's group finally returns to the city, they are surprised that a carriage is already waiting on them in order to discuss business. Leaving their newborn child, Kikirichu in Jafar's care, Hinahoho and Rurumu head out with the carriage. Jafar is escorted into the Colosseum, where he is shocked to see Sinbad perform one of his plays in front of a massive audience. He is so surprised by the scene that he fails to notice Kikiriku wandering off on his own. When he notices that the baby is gone, it is already too late. Following his sounds, he finds Kikiriku inside of a monster's enclosure. Without wasting any time, he throws himself onto the creature in an attempt to save Kikiriku from getting eaten. But the monster manages to overpower Jafar, and he is almost knocked out. Brought to the brink of giving up, he curses his weak self for being so useless. It is then that Sinbad's words and actions resound within him, and he remembers how it felt when he showed him a new path in life. Drawing on power from that moment, he manages to call forth some of Baal's power as a member of Sinbad's household, and with that power he strikes at the monster once more. This time it is more than enough to overpower the foe, and he manages to rescue Kikiriku before passing out due to exertion. When he comes to, Sinbad is by his side. He reassures Jafar that the baby is okay, and praises him for doing a good job saving him. Jafar reveals that his weapons were engulfed by the same lightning power as Sinbad's, and both of them are excited by the discovery of how households share and grow in power. When Rurumu hears how Jafar risked his life to save her child, she thanks him from the bottom of her heart, telling him that no matter what, she will always consider him to be her first child. When the group is finally brought in front of Sinbad's headquarters, they are shocked to see just how much he managed to accomplish during their absence. Namely, the creation of the Cinder Trading Corporation, which is able to conduct trade not only in Rhyme, but across the world. Not to mention the fact that the same merchant who tricked them before is none other but the king of Balbad, and that he is teaching Sinbad the art of the trade. Sinbad quickly reminds them that this is just the foundation he needs to start his country, so they need to get things running quickly and head towards their next destination. Next on their list is the Sassan Kingdom. Jafar briefs them that this kingdom has the highest quality metals in the whole world, but they are extremely secluded and have only recently opened up to trade with Rhyme. In order to make contact with them, Sinbad takes Jafar and Hinahobo with him, while leaving the rest back at the Cinder Corporation headquarters to make sure it is operating smoothly. The citizens of Sassan are still devoted to the teachings of the old gods and have thus secluded themselves from the outside world, considering it impure and heretical. When Sinbad makes contact with their trade official, it becomes evident that they have no desire to establish any form of trade with them exactly because of that reason. In order to find a way to negotiate, Sinbad expresses his desire to become a friend of their country and learn their customs. His negotiating skills manage to open up the trader, who tells them to try and discuss the matter with the Holy Knights, as they hold the highest degree of power here. More specifically, the Night King, Darius. But when Sinbad tries to make contact with them, he is pushed aside and all of his attempts to meet with Darius are ignored. Not sure how to proceed, Sinbad's group takes a break at the local tavern, where they suddenly get approached by a young man. He reveals that unlike his fellow countrymen, he is very interested in the outside world. But since he is forbidden from ever leaving the city, he depends on adventurers like them to tell him stories of faraway places. The tavern keeper notices him and reprimands him, telling him that someone of his status should know better than to wander into this establishment. As it turns out, he is the son of the Night King himself, and his name is Mistress. Realizing that this is their way to meet Darius, Sinbad quickly charms the tavern keeper to allow Mistress to spend some time with them. Mistress begs them to share their stories with him, and Sinbad is happy to oblige, treating him to a private performance, retelling his conquest thus far. When the show is over, Mistress makes up his mind to leave this country, telling Sinbad that he would rather breathe the air of freedom and die early than suffer a long life trapped behind these walls. The following day, Mistress gets intercepted by his father on his way to meet Sinbad again. It turns out Spardos, Mistress' younger brother, alerted their father to the fact that he is missing because he could not find him in his quarters. When confronted about it, Mistress opens up to Darius, telling him that he wishes to leave this country and not become a knight who is eternally bound to stay within its walls. But instead of saying anything, Darius just slaps him across the face and leaves. Mistress approaches Sinbad's group, begging them to accept him and take him along on their adventures. Spardos followed him as well, and he tries to convince Mistress to stay, revealing that their father wants to succeed in one day. But Mistress has made up his mind already, and he is willing to put his life on the line for his dream. So he tells Spardos to deliver Darius a message, namely that he will be officially leaving the Order of Knights. The following day, Yunan suddenly appears before Sinbad's group. He tells Sinbad that many other dungeon conquerors have appeared, and he is no longer the only one who holds such powerful weapons at his disposal. It turns out that Darius is one such dungeon conqueror. Just as quickly as he appeared, Yunan vanished once more, much to the surprise of Jafar and Hinahoho. With no time to waste, they go to the Knights building, where Mistress has to fight his way through the ranks of the Knights in order to be allowed to leave the Order. He makes easy work out of all of them, but when it comes to his father, his skill with the spear proves to be of little use, as Darius invokes the power of the Jinn and overpowers his son. While calling it a god's power, he gets ready to pass judgment over his son. As it turns out, by tradition, the loser of this battle is sentenced to death. But before Darius can execute Mistress, Sinbad steps in and interrupts their match. He is quick to dismiss the idea that this power is something granted by some god, explaining how it is actually granted to anyone who is capable of conquering a dungeon, and thus has nothing to do with their holy doctrine. To prove his point, he challenges Darius to a duel, while proclaiming that he is the same as he is a fellow dungeon conqueror. Jafar quickly realizes that Sinbad is forcing this narrative so that Darius could no longer afford to ignore him. And this proves to be correct, as Darius decides to accept the challenge, postponing the execution of his son for later, agreeing that the terms of their duel will be Sinbad's death if he were to lose, while if he were to win, Mistress will be released into his care and a trade agreement with Simvir will be signed. With both sides in agreement, the battle begins. Although at first they both seem to be evenly matched, Sinbad quickly reveals his trump card. It turns out he has mastered his control over the Jinn powers even further, allowing him to undergo a full-body Jinn equip, which transforms him into something akin to a demon, boosting his power far above anything seen thus far. With one strike of his empowered lightning, he blasts the roof open and knocks all of the holy knights present to their feet, while whisking Darius away, flying him to a secluded location far enough so they will not be observed by others. It is there that he lays out his plan to change the world for the better before him. But when he sees that Darius is still being stubborn, he shows him just how powerful he really is. With a swing of his sword, he fires a lightning bolt so devastating it blows away mountains in its path. Realizing that Sinbad is powerful enough to back up his words and enforce his dream, Darius cannot help but admit defeat. While Sinbad reminds him that he could easily wipe Sassan out in the blink of an eye, he ensures Darius that conquest by force is not his goal. Instead, he wishes to establish trade with his country and form an alliance with them once his own country is finally established. Sinbad reveals to him that dungeons are appearing all over the world, and many countries as well as individuals are gaining power beyond belief. This will cause chaos and throw the world off balance, so he wishes to gather allies who will share his dream of peace and mutual understanding. Back at the Knights' headquarters, the Knights are getting worried, seeing that their leader is missing for a while now. Suddenly, with a flash of lightning, both Darius and Sinbad reappear before them. In order to smooth things over, Sinbad declares that their fight was a draw, and that they have realized during their bout that the same god has given both of them the same powers, so they could stand hand in hand and protect the world from peril. Hearing this from Darius as well, the Knights quickly accept those words as the will of God and start celebrating their new alliance with the Apostle Sinbad, When Mistress packs his things and leaves the knight's headquarters, Darius comes to see him off. He reveals that in the past he had the same dream as he does, wishing to see the world and free himself from the traditions of their home. But unlike him, he had no one to talk to. And now he wants him to travel the world in his stead as well as a knight no less. This touches Mistress, and he thanks his father for always being a strong pillar he could rely on, as that inspired him to push himself as far as he did. Before he can leave, Mistress is confronted by Spardos as well, who is upset that he did not go see him before setting out. Spardos is very attached to his older brother, and when Mistress realizes just how much he means to him, he reassures him that he will return. After all, he is in charge of trade with Sasson, so he will return home quite frequently. And when Spardos is old enough, he is certain that Darius will give him the same mission as him, and then he will gladly take him along on his adventures. After they say their goodbyes, it is time for Sinbad's group, now joined by Mistress, to set out towards their next destination, which Jafar reveals to be Artemyra Kingdom, a matriarchal union ruled by a war maiden. Mistress is excited for his next adventure, and just the sight of the ocean is enough to confirm to him that the choice he made was the right one. Getting closer to their destination, Sinbad's group is greeted by a pair of girls flying on top of a giant bird. They teasingly invite them to have some fun together if they are able to reach the city before flying ahead on their way. Excited at their invitation, Mistress gets even more motivated to traverse the rough environment. After all, it is only so far they can go by ship, and before long they are forced to hike during a very inhospitable ravine. The constant climbing and the relentless, humid heat getting to Sinbad and Hinahoho. But eventually they are able to make steady progress despite Sinbad's constant complaining. Exhausted, hungry, and in a desperate need of a bath, they finally make their way to Artemyra. What they immediately notice is how the locals tame the native giant birds to help them traverse the inhospitable giant ravine. But it turns out that this place has no inns since they never get any travelers, so they are forced to take a bath in the river nearby. That or the red light district, but with Jafar being strongly against the latter, they have to go to the river. Once they freshen themselves up, they are ready to meet the war maiden. She decides to play a practical joke on them when they reach the palace, taking the role of a guard, while the person obscured by shadow on her throne is but a doll. When she has enough, she steps forward and reveals her true identity, namely Mira, the queen of Artemyra. She tells them to entertain her as she has no interest in talking business with men. But Sinbad quickly resorts to his lady charm and tries to sweet-talk her into getting his way. But much to his surprise, his seductive charm has the opposite effect on her, only spurring her anger. In the process, she notices that Sinbad is also a conqueror and takes his sword away from him, ordering her fellow maidens to strip them all of their belongings and drop them in the Valley of the Dead, the darkest, deepest part of the ravine, telling them to come back alive if they are able to. The only one spared from that fate is Hinahoho, as the war maidens have taken quite the liking to his very masculine physique, so they have a very different kind of torture in mind for him, one involving no sleep whatsoever. The naked trio in the valley manage to survive their fall, and after covering up their privates with some leaves, they realize that they are not going to get out of here anytime soon. With the hunger and exhaustion setting in from the heat, their only source of sustenance are 2 emergency rations which Mistress hid away in his turban. After gulping those down, they decide to rest and recover some strength. Sinbad wakes up in the middle of the night, only to notice that they are completely covered by venomous snakes. Screaming in a panic, he wakes everyone up and they retreat to high ground. While Sinbad and Mistress panic, Jafar takes control of the situation. Displaying his expertise as an assassin, he starts slaughtering the snakes, showing the panicked duo how they can be easily used as a source of nutrition. With the food problem out of the way, the naked trio sets up a proper little camp down in the ravine, even building themselves a little shack, going as far as to get comfortable in a hostile environment. As days come and go, Mistress gets upset that they are getting used to the survival setting instead of doing something to get out of the ravine. But neither Sinbad nor Jafar pay any heed to him. In his frustration, Mistress goes exploring to try and find something new, and is pleasantly surprised when he discovers a large piece of meat just laying on the ground. When he brings it back to the camps, Sinbad and Jafar are excited about it, but for the completely wrong reason. The two of them are excited to finally have some proper meat to eat, instead of trying to figure out where it came from. Mistress flips out once again, but it is all in vain, as they have no interests other than preparing the meat. While cooking the piece of meat, they realize that it is covered by precious stones, but they just toss them to the side, seeing that they have no use for them right now. Deciding to follow Mistress to the location where he found the meat, they realize that it was not there during the day, but it has only appeared recently. But yet again, instead of looking into it, they just collect all the small pieces they can get their hands on. While they are doing so, the giant birds swoop in and snatch all of the remaining pieces of meat away. Mistress starts losing hope, but Sinbad reassures him that fate is shown on the way out. Meanwhile, up in the city, the amount of precious gems retrieved from the meat has suddenly dropped, so they are trying to figure out a way to fix the problem. Mistress has another fit of complaining about them not doing anything but thinking of meat when suddenly a bunch of huge pieces of meat drop down next to them. Using those pieces of meat for their plan, they carve them out and hide inside of them, using the birds to carry them back up to the city, where they give the men working on harvesting the gemstones quite the shock. Jafar explains how they purposefully snatch all the small pieces of meat, which would make those in the city believe that a smaller carnivore has made its way into the valley below, so they would drop larger pieces of meat instead. Sinbad wastes no time and goes straight to the queen while Jafar and Mistress retrieve their gear and find Hinahobo. Upon arriving at Mira's chambers in the middle of the night, he surprises her with yet another bold, charming move, sweet-talking to her while snatching back his stolen metal vessels, housing the jinns he has conquered. But yet again, Mira is not one to listen to a man or fall for his charms, so she quickly draws her weapon and a fight ensues. She reveals that Sinbad is not the only one capable of a full-body jinn equip, as she shows the power of her own jinn Cerberus. Realizing that he is at a disadvantage when it comes to raw firepower, Sinbad switches from Baal's equip into Valefor. Although it does not seem to make much of a difference, as Mira keeps dominating the battle with her 3 different elements jinn, Sinbad remains calm and composed. Soon enough it becomes apparent why, as none of her attacks or powers seem to be able to connect with him. Jafar explains to Mistress that Valefor's true power is to stagnate his opponent, making the queen weaker and weaker without her even noticing. Deciding it is time to wrap things up, Sinbad uses Valefor's control over ice to freeze her in a block of ice once she is weakened enough. This truly shocks Mira, considering that never before in her life she was bested by a man. The following day, Sinbad, Jafar, and Mistress get another audience with Queen Mira, who has her sore body being tended to by her aides, the sight of which is too much for Mistress to handle. Despite being frustrated about being bested by a man, Mira decides to honor Sinbad's request for a trade alliance with his company, officially signing it and revealing that she has no desire to be his enemy down the line, wondering what his true agenda is. Sinbad is more than happy to reveal his grand dream of creating a world without war, a world where everyone can get along with each other. In order to achieve that world of peace, he needs to create a powerful alliance that can back him up. Telling her about the alliances he forged already, she cannot help but be impressed. During their talk, she reveals that Ryan has a powerful sorceress backing them up, whose cooperation would be welcome, as she has lived for 200 years and is rumored to be a legendary Magi. Sinbad has never heard of Magi before, so he inquires more about them. But the only thing Mira knows is that they are blessed by ruck and wield powers beyond what normal humans could ever hope to. Their duty is apparently to select kings, so it is believed that they are behind the sudden appearance of dungeons all across the world. Linking those things together, Sinbad realizes that Yunan must be a Magi, considering the timing of his appearance and what he did for him. Returning to the topic at hand, Mira decides to agree to the future alliance with Sinbad's country, considering that he is the only man she has ever approved of. With their belongings returned, the War Maidens also return their final missing member, Hinahoho, who the group almost entirely forgot about. When they hear what a wonderful time he had, they wonder what his wife will do to him when she finds out, which sends him into a panic, swearing that he did not do anything bad. With the business part of their visit to Artemyra over, Sinbad and Mistress decide to pay a visit to their red light district. But their hopes of a wonderful time are quickly shattered when they realize that, just like with all roles being reversed in this kingdom, the main attractions of the red light district are men. The following day, a new member, Parsine, joins their group serving as Mira's envoy. But Sinbad and Mistress are too shaken from last night's events to even introduce themselves. Before they start their journey back, Mira comes to bid them farewell, revealing that she has many daughters, who she hopes will be able to learn from Sinbad in the future. The youngest of them, Pisti, already gets attached to him, giving him good luck charm before they part ways. Their trip back to the company headquarters is uneventful, but as soon as they return, Sinbad decides to hold a great feast to properly welcome the new members of their team. When everyone gathers around, Sinbad holds a speech, capturing their attention with his usual charisma. In his speech, he promises to continue expanding the Sindria Corporation so that they become the leading trade company in Rime, which will serve as the perfect foundation for their own nation, Sindria, and their ideal future.